I've had my dog Buddy for 8 years now, and he's never been the anxious type. He doesn't bark at the mailman. He doesn't freak out over fireworks. He barely even looks up when I have people over. He's just the kind of dog that minds his business, unless something is really wrong. So, when he started growling at the back door that night, it immediately put me on edge. It was around 11 p.m., and I was stretched out on the couch, watching some old action movie while scrolling through my phone. The fireplace crackled, the wind rattled lightly against the windows, and Buddy was curled up on his dog bed in the corner of the room. At least, he had been. I looked up when I heard the low, rumbling growl. Buddy was standing now, ears pinned back, head slightly lowered. His eyes were locked onto the back door, completely still. I sat up, setting my phone down. "What is it, Bud?" He didn't look at me. He just kept staring. I looked in the direction he was looking, right at the door, expecting to see a raccoon or a stray cat. Nothing. The backyard was dark, the trees swaying against the moonlight. Snow covered the ground, untouched. But Buddy wouldn't stop growling. I grabbed the flashlight from the end table and stood, still kind of convinced it was nothing. The moment I walked toward the door, Buddy's growling got louder. I flipped on the porch light. The backyard flooded with a dim yellow glow, illuminating the patio, the fence line, and the bare trees beyond it. Nothing moved. I cracked the door open slightly, enough to feel the bite of cold air against my face. "Hey!" I called out into the night. "Anyone out there?" Silence. I waited, listening. The wind rustled through the trees. A distant car rumbled down a street somewhere. That was it. I shook my head, feeling stupid. "It's fine, Buddy," I muttered, shutting the door. "Probably just a deer or something." But Buddy didn't move from his spot. He didn't sit down, didn't relax. He just kept staring at the door. I should have trusted him. By morning, I had all but forgotten about it. I fed Buddy, drank my coffee, and headed outside to let him do his thing. The sky was overcast, the air thick and biting, with that damp pre-snow feeling. Buddy trotted out onto the porch. Then he stopped. His body went rigid. His ears flattened against his head. I followed his stare, and dread coiled in my stomach. There were footprints in the snow. Muddy, heavy tracks leading up from the yard, straight to my bedroom window. I forced down a lump in my throat, my body going cold despite the sweatshirt I was wearing. The prints didn't go anywhere else. Whoever made them hadn't gone to the back door, hadn't wandered around. They had walked straight to my window and stopped. I took a step closer. The prints were deep. Whoever it was had been standing there for a while, just watching. Buddy let out a low growl beside me, his tail stiff. I forced myself to take a breath. There had to be an explanation. Maybe it was a neighbor cutting through my yard. Maybe some drunk guy thought he was at the wrong house. Maybe. I grabbed a shovel from the porch and smashed the footprints apart. I didn't want to see them. But that night, Buddy didn't just growl. He whined. And that scared me more than anything. I barely slept. I stayed up late, sitting on the couch with a baseball bat balanced across my lap, TV on low, Buddy curled up beside me. He kept lifting his head every few minutes, staring at the back door, like he was waiting. By 3 a.m., exhaustion won out. I took the bat with me into my bedroom and locked the door. I should have felt safer. I didn't. I woke up a few hours later to the sound of Buddy whining. Not barking, not growling, whining. I blinked groggily, still tangled in my blankets. Then I heard the second noise. A soft tap on the glass. My chest tightened, my stomach churning. I didn't move. Another tap. I knew exactly where it was coming from. My bedroom window. Buddy whimpered again from the other side of the door, scratching at the wood. The air in my room felt wrong. I lay there, barely breathing, listening to the silence stretch on and on. I don't know how long I waited, my body stiff, my fingers curled into the blanket, but eventually the tapping stopped, and I wasn't about to go see why. By morning, my nerves were shot. I threw open my bedroom door, and Buddy nearly knocked me over trying to get inside. He ran straight to the window, sniffing furiously at the frame, his ears pinned back. I swallowed hard. I had to look. Slowly, I pulled back the curtain and peered outside. More footprints, but this time, they didn't just stop at the window. This time, they led back into the woods. Deep, heavy tracks disappearing into the tree line. I stood there gripping the windowsill, my pulse hammering. Whoever had been out there hadn't even tried to come inside. They hadn't broken in, hadn't tried the doors, they had just stood there, watching, for hours, maybe longer. I couldn't just sit there anymore. 2 nights in a row, Buddy had sensed something out there. 2 nights of feeling watched, of hearing noises, of seeing those damn footprints. I decided enough was enough. That night, I kept the lights off and sat in the living room, baseball bat across my lap, Buddy at my feet. I didn't turn on the TV, didn't check my phone, just waited, staring out the window. By 2:30 a.m., Buddy's ears perked up, his body tensed. A minute later, he was growling, not loud, not barking, just that low, deep rumble that sent every hair on my body standing up. I had the bat in one hand, my phone in the other, ready to call 911 the second I needed to. I sat in the dark, my pulse steady, eyes locked on the window. I knew they'd be back. And they were. Buddy's growl deepened. His body tensed like a coiled spring. His gaze was locked on the window, but he wasn't looking at the glass. He was looking lower, at the crack under the window frame, at something slipping inside. The smallest, thinnest piece of metal I'd ever seen, sliding through the gap from the outside. My chest tightened. Someone was trying to unlatch my window. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Just watched. The metal hook, whatever it was, wiggled, barely making a sound. Whoever was holding it had done this before. They were taking their time. Like they knew I was inside. Like they wanted to see if I'd react. I clenched the bat. If that latch moved, I was swinging. Then, Buddy snapped. He lunged at the window, barking so viciously it startled even me. Claws scraping against the wood, snarling, teeth bared. The metal hook jerked back immediately. And then, silence. I ran to the back door and slowly I eased it open, stepping barefoot onto the cold wooden deck. Buddy stayed low beside me, his growl still vibrating through his chest. The backyard was empty, or at least it looked empty. Then Buddy lunged forward, snarling. My grip tightened on the bat as my eyes darted to where he was looking. A shadow moved near the tree line. Not an animal, someone tall, standing still, watching. I barely had time to react before they moved. Not toward me, away. They disappeared into the woods, fast, like they knew the land better than I did. Like they had done this before. I ran forward, bat raised, but Buddy stopped at the edge of the yard, barking like crazy. I couldn't see where the person had gone, but I felt them, still close, still watching. I don't know if Buddy scared them off, or if they just decided they had seen enough, but whoever it was never came back. And I never found out who it was. I filed a report with the police, but there wasn't much they could do. Could have been some kid messing around, one of the officers said. But I knew that wasn't it. I felt it. And I know Buddy felt it too. To this day, I don't sleep near windows. Because if Buddy hadn't been there, if I had dozed off even for a second, I don't think they would have just stood outside. I think they would have finished what they started. I used to live alone, out on a rural property about 30 minutes outside of Denver. It was quiet, peaceful, just me, my truck, and a workshop out back where I work on cars. The kind of place where nothing ever really happens. Or at least, that's what I thought. I keep a second fridge in my garage, mostly for beer and snacks. At first, I didn't even notice anything missing. A couple of beers here and there, a snack bar or two. I figured I just lost track. Then, one morning, I went out to grab a drink and realized the fridge door was slightly open. Not wide open, swinging in the wind, just barely cracked. And this time, I knew I hadn't left it that way. Still, I shrugged it off. Maybe an animal had nudged it open. It wasn't a big deal. At least that's what I told myself. A week later, more food was gone. Not just beer this time, some of the bottled water, a couple of instant meals, even some old leftovers I had completely forgotten about. That's when I started to feel weird about it. If this were just raccoons or something, they wouldn't be selective about what they took. And if it were a person, well, I'd have bigger problems than a couple of missing beers. So I set up a trail camera facing the garage. I wasn't expecting to see much. Maybe a coyote sniffing around, maybe nothing at all. The next morning, I checked the footage. Then my stomach dropped. I saw him, a man, crawling out of my shed at 2 a.m. I stared at the screen, my chest rising and falling too fast. He was tall, lanky, dressed in layers of old, ragged clothes. He moved slowly, carefully, looking toward the house as he crept across the yard toward the garage. He didn't go inside. He just stood there, staring at the kitchen window, for 10 minutes. Then he turned and slowly backed away into the darkness. I watched the footage over and over, my fingers gripping the phone so hard it hurt. Someone was living in my shed. And not just that. He had been watching me. I didn't sleep that night. I sat up in the living room with my shotgun on my lap, every creak of the house making my pulse jump. By sunrise, I had already called the cops. When they arrived, I led them straight to the shed. They pulled open the door, flashlights cutting through the dark interior, and yeah, he had been living there. A sleeping bag was crumpled in the corner. Empty food wrappers were scattered around. A few bottles of beer, a small pile of random clothes, even a toothbrush. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the notebook. Nestled right next to the sleeping bag, barely visible beneath a worn-out jacket. One of the officers flipped it open. Pages and pages of rambling handwriting, and one name scrawled over and over. My name. The officers skimmed through the pages, their expressions really serious. They handed it to me. For a moment, I just touched the cover, debating for a second before picking it up. The first few pages were just random, messy thoughts, strange, disconnected sentences. Then it got worse. He wrote about my house, my routine, the times I left for work, the times I came home. One entry made my stomach twist. He leaves his bedroom window unlocked sometimes. I stared at the words, my whole body going rigid. The officers told me they'd patrol the area but couldn't do much else. The shed was empty. The guy was long gone. And that was supposed to be the end of it. But it wasn't, because a few nights later, he came back. It was around 2 a.m. when I woke up. At first, I didn't know why. Then I heard it, a creak. Not from outside, from inside the house. I sat up, heart hammering, my hands gripping the sheets. Another creak, this time from the kitchen. I slid out of bed, moving slowly, carefully. I didn't turn on any lights. I grabbed the shotgun from beside my bed and stepped into the hall. The house was dark. I listened. Silence. I made my way toward the kitchen, almost tiptoeing. Then I saw the back door, standing wide open. A gust of cold air blew inside, sending a shiver down my spine. I checked the whole house, every room, every closet, but there was no one there. I locked the doors, turned on every light, and sat awake until morning. The next day, I checked the trail cam. I don't even know why. Maybe I was hoping I'd see nothing. That the door had just blown open on its own, that I had imagined the noise. But when I pulled up the footage, there he was, right outside my garage, staring straight at the camera, and this time he was smiling. I moved 2 months later. The cops never found him. They figured he was some drifter passing through, squatting where he could. But I don't think that's true. I think he had been there for a long time, watching. And even now, when I close my eyes at night, I still see that smile. I'm not a paranoid person. I've lived alone for years, and I like it. I keep my doors locked, I don't answer the door for random strangers, and I've never been the kind of person who jumps at creaky house noises. But after what happened, I don't think I'll ever feel safe alone again. It started with something small, something so minor that I almost ignored it. It was a Thursday night, just after midnight, and I was finishing up work in my home office. My laptop was burning hot against my thighs, and my neck was sore from sitting hunched over all day. I shut my laptop and stretched, standing up. Time to lock up. I had a habit of checking my front door before bed. It wasn't even about security. It was just a routine. I'd lock up, flip off the porch light, and look at my phone one last time before crashing. That night, I stepped onto the porch, rubbing my arms against the cold. Then I saw that the key was missing. I always kept a spare under the doormat. I knew it wasn't the safest spot, but I liked having a backup in case I locked myself out. And yet, when I lifted the mat, it wasn't there. I frowned and crouched down, running my fingers along the rough concrete. Nothing. Maybe I had kicked it aside earlier? That was the first time I ignored the feeling creeping up my spine. I locked the door, double-checked it, and told myself I'd just forgotten that I moved the key. I went to bed completely unaware that this was only the beginning. The next morning, I texted my best friend Lauren, "Hey, did you take the spare key?" She texted back, "Nope, should I have?" That left only one option. Someone else had taken it. The thought made my stomach twist, but I forced logic into it. Maybe a neighbor had found it and planned to return it. Maybe I had moved it and completely forgotten. It was fine. I shook off the feeling and spent the rest of the day working. I had deadlines to meet, and honestly, by late afternoon, I'd all but convinced myself it wasn't worth worrying about. Then the sun set, and something shifted. That night, I went through my usual routine: dinner, shower, some Netflix in bed. I even felt a little silly for overthinking the key thing. Until I turned off the TV. That's when I noticed it. The feeling. I can't explain it properly, but if you've ever had someone watching you from across a room, you know exactly what I mean. It was that creeping sensation, like someone was standing just outside my field of vision, staring. The hairs on my arms stood up. I turned my head toward my bedroom door. It was open. I stared at it for a long time, my pulse speeding up. Hadn't I closed it? For the first time in years, I got up, walked to the door, and locked it. I woke up in total darkness. The air in my bedroom felt too thick, too heavy, like I had woken up into something wrong. Then I heard it, a click. Not a loud noise, not a thud or a crash or anything dramatic, just a soft metallic click. I went completely still. That was the sound of a key turning in a lock. I strained my ears, barely breathing. Silence. Then, another noise. A quiet shuffle, the faintest creak of weight pressing into the floorboards. It was coming from outside my bedroom. I turned my head toward my door. Still locked. My pulse pounded as I slowly reached for my phone. I squeezed my eyes shut, listening. Then, under the thin gap at the bottom of the door, a shadow moved. I had to move. I slipped out of bed as quietly as I could, every muscle in my body locked up in terror. The closet. It was the only place to hide. I took slow, measured steps toward it, keeping my eyes locked on the shadow beneath the door. My hands trembled as I eased the closet door open and slipped inside. The house was too quiet. Then, right outside my room, the floorboards creaked. The door handle shifted. Whoever was out there was testing it. I pressed my back against the wall of the closet, heart hammering. Another noise, the softest tap against the door, like fingertips trailing across the wood. Then, nothing. Minutes passed, maybe an hour. I lost all sense of time, my mind frozen in fear. Then, the footsteps retreated. I stayed hidden until the first streaks of morning light crept under the closet door. I checked every inch of the house. The front door was locked, the windows were locked, nothing was stolen. There was no sign of forced entry. It was like I had imagined the whole thing, except I stepped onto the porch, my hands shaking. Slowly, I reached down and lifted the doormat. The key was back, sitting exactly where it had been before. My breath hitched. I had spent all day wondering where it had gone, but the real question was never where it had gone. It was who had used it. And more importantly, why did they put it back? I changed my locks that same day, but I never found out who had been in my house that night. I told myself it was just a break-in gone wrong. Maybe someone had used the key but panicked when they heard me wake up. But sometimes, on nights when I wake up unexpectedly, my chest tight and my pulse pounding, I wonder if they were ever really planning to steal anything. Because nothing was taken, nothing was broken. And sometimes it's not about what someone wants to take, it's about what they want to see. I work from home as an IT technician, and I like my routine. Early mornings, coffee on the porch, quiet nights with a book or a movie. My neighborhood is calm, the kind where people wave but don't pry. I don't get unexpected visitors. So when someone knocked on my door at 3 p.m. on a Wednesday, I was already wary. I set down my coffee and walked to the front door. Through the peephole, I saw a man in a navy blue jumpsuit. Early 40s, thin, clean-shaven. He wasn't familiar. I cracked the door an inch, keeping the chain lock in place. Yeah? The man smiled, but something about it was wrong. Too wide. Too forced. Hey there, sir, I'm with the gas company. We're checking on a potential leak in the area. Need to inspect your pipes inside. That was the first red flag. I didn't move. If there was an issue with the gas line, wouldn't they have called or emailed first? I didn't let my voice give anything away. You got any ID? The man's smile twitched. His posture shifted slightly. Then he gestured vaguely down the street. My truck's just down there. I can grab my badge if you need it. I followed his hand. No truck. The street was empty. I looked back at him. He was still smiling. Too much. Something about the way he stood, the way he avoided eye contact, made my stomach turn. No, thanks, I said, starting to close the door. I'll call the gas company myself if I'm concerned. He didn't step forward, but he didn't step back either. He just stood there, lingering, like he was waiting for me to change my mind. The door clicked shut. I locked it, bolted it. I didn't go back to work. I stayed by the window, watching him. For a few minutes, the man just stood on my porch, hands in his pockets, staring at the door. Then, finally, he walked away. Not toward the street, not toward a truck. He walked around the side of my house. I lost sight of him after that. I waited 10 minutes, then 15. I didn't see him leave. I checked the back door. Still locked. The yard was empty. I kept telling myself it was fine, but deep down, I knew something was off. Something about the way he had been too comfortable standing there. Like he wasn't in a hurry. Like he had all the time in the world. That night, I double-checked everything. Windows, locked. Doors, locked. Porch lights, on. I should have felt safe, but I didn't. At 2:47 a.m., I woke up without knowing why. The house was quiet, but then I heard a soft creak. I sat up, not from inside, from the yard. I climbed out of bed, my heart racing like it was trying to escape my chest. I grabbed the flashlight by my nightstand and crept toward the back door. Something wasn't right. I flicked the light on and aimed it outside. My back gate was wide open, my breath caught. I always locked that gate, and then I saw them. Footprints. Fresh ones. Leading up to my basement door. The door was locked, but someone had been there. I didn't open the door. I didn't even breathe. I just turned off the flashlight, locked the deadbolt, and sat in my kitchen, gripping the handle of a knife until the sun came up. The next morning, I went next door to talk to my neighbor, Mrs. Landry. She was retired, spent most of her time gardening or watching the street from her porch. I figured if anyone saw something, it was her. When I asked if she had noticed a gas worker the day before, she looked like she'd seen a ghost. "I saw him," she said, "but he wasn't a gas worker." I felt my stomach drop. She told me she saw him knocking on 3 other doors before mine. One woman let him in. "What happened?" She frowned. "Not sure. She seemed fine, but I saw her changing her locks the next morning." That meant he had gotten inside at least one house. That's when I called the gas company, and they confirmed my worst fear. They hadn't sent anyone to my neighborhood. I filed a report with the police. They checked the yard, took notes, but never found him. Probably just a scammer, they said, trying to get inside houses and steal valuables. That should have made me feel better, but it didn't, because the guy at my door never pushed, never asked again, never tried to convince me. He just stood there, like he was waiting for something. Weeks passed. I changed my locks. I added cameras. Then, one night, I woke up to a noise inside the house. Not a knock, a soft shuffle, like footsteps. I bolted upright, my breath catching in my throat. My bedroom door was closed, but suddenly it didn't feel like enough. I grabbed my phone, flipped to the security app, and checked the cameras. Front porch, backyard. Then I switched to the indoor camera, the one in my living room, and my stomach clenched. The front door was open. I hadn't heard it unlock. Hadn't heard it swing open, but it was. Wide enough that I could see outside. Wide enough that someone had been there, or was still inside. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I had locked that door before bed, double-checked it. I swiped through the camera feeds, trying to figure out who had opened it, but then it hit me. I hadn't installed memory cards yet. No recordings, no way to check what happened minutes before. Just the live view, meaning whoever had been there, I had just missed them. I gripped the bat I kept beside my bed and slid off the mattress. The floor felt too loud under my feet. I eased open the bedroom door, heart hammering against my ribs. The house was silent, but I could feel it. That thick, heavy feeling, like someone had just been standing in the room with me. I moved down the hall, every nerve in my body screaming. The living room was empty. The door was still cracked open. I don't know how long I stood there, gripping the bat so tightly my fingers ached. I checked the locks 3 times before shutting the door. Then I sat on the couch, back against the wall, and waited for morning. Nothing was stolen. No windows were broken. No forced entry. Just the open door, like someone had walked in, stood there, listened, and left. I changed every lock the next day, installed deadbolts, and bought memory cards for every camera. but I never figured out how the door had opened. I never figured out who had come inside. And that's what keeps me up at night, not knowing if they left or if they're just waiting for the right night to try again. If these stories made you rethink answering the door, hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs a reminder to stay alert. Have your own chilling home alone experience? Drop it in the comments or email me. I want to hear every eerie detail. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another nightmare. Being home alone is supposed to be safe, but sometimes the danger is already inside. Stay safe out there, and remember, not every knock is from someone you want to let in. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.